Disabilities Act. It was signed into law in 1990. It prohibits discrimination. Okay, that word discrimination in the United States of America has a heavy connotation to it, right? ADA prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability. Again, here's a slide that I'm press pause on the presentation. This is what I'm talking about, a slide with a lot of words on it, really dense words. And I know that breaks presentation rules, but I'd rather if I'm quoting the 42 USC, then it's going to be exact what they said, but the bolding is mine. Okay, so that's enough on the slides. But you get into the ADA, and so our nation wants to eliminate discrimination against individuals with disabilities. So if we have programs, projects, those types of things as government entities, it's against the law, and it is a civil law, civil rights law. So ADA carries a lot of weight, a lot of power behind it. Look at the 5 acts. The one that affects us, the folks on this webinar the most, is Title II. That's where we're pulling a lot of the information that we are trying to understand ADA. And I want to also point out Title V created an entity called the U.S. Access Board. If you need help, the U.S. Access Board has an excellent website, and they do take phone calls. I have called the U.S. Access Board many times over the years when it gets to things that it's hard for me to figure out a solution. So highly encourage the U.S. Access Board, especially their website. Okay. So moving on, diving into Title II a little bit. Of course, it continues to talk about making sure that we're not discriminating against the individuals with disabilities, but the requirement from ADA to us in the state government and in local governments and public entities is that we cannot do things that exclude individuals with disabilities in our programs or services and activities. And an example of a program is pedestrian facilities. Sidewalks, crosswalks, pedestrian curb ramps, et cetera, et cetera. So we can't just roll up our sidewalk and call it good. Oh, it's an attempt at humor. I'm talking about sidewalks. It's hard to be funny. At least give me an A for effort, okay? If you're from where I'm from in Southern Kentucky, we rolled up our sidewalks at about 8 o'clock at night, and then we were done. But shameless promotion here. If you want to hear more dad jokes like the one I just gave about rolling up sidewalks, we've actually got a training coming up that I teach. It's a full day, November 15th. So it's just in a week or so. It's ADA sidewalk facilities for public rights of way. And take this if you actually want to get into the details of accessibility of a sidewalk. So this is very, I'm an engineer by trade. So this training is very heavy on engineering terminology. It'll tell the width required, the slope required, the cross slope required. So if your eyes start to glaze over with me just even saying cross slope, slope, and width, this class isn't for you. But if you're the type of person that wants to get into those details and understand a little bit better, shameless promotion, go to Technology Transfer, same place that this webinar was publicized, and sign up for this class. We'd love to have you. It is virtual as well. So if you need more information about sidewalks and things, come to that class. But we're going to transition to, sorry for the bad pun. At least I'm trying, come on. We're going to transition to ADA transition plans. And please note that the sources are given down here. Again, it's very litigious subject matter. So I've quoted directly from FHWA, Federal Highway Administration. There's a question and answer page that they have their Office of Civil Rights. And again, this is civil rights law. So that's a big stick, right? We in America love our civil rights and want them protected. So some of the answers are coming from FHWA. Some of the answers are coming from a Transportation Research Board research report, NCHRP project number 20-7. 232. You can Google either one of those and find a lot of information. So starting at the beginning, what the heck are we talking about, Jeff? What is an ADA transition plan? Well, so the ADA starts out talking to public entities like us and requires us to do self-evaluations. That term self-evaluation is repeated over and over in different guidance documents in the ADA itself. And a self-assessment is a good thing, right? That means the federal government's basically saying, hey, look, we don't have the staff for this. Gosh, we states and we locals don't have the staff for this either, quite frankly. But we are required to do self-evaluations of our facilities from the lens of looking at what is accessibility, what is accessible, and how do we approve accessibility. So that is a requirement. And in the ADA, agencies are required to develop quote, a program access plan, which we truncated or abbreviated almost a nickname. The program access plan is our transition plan. So that transition plan is going to help us address any deficiencies that we have in things that we own as public entities, as states, cities, counties, etc. So part of the requirement is that we, the public organizations, adopt that transition plan, and we're going to, in that transition plan, identify the physical obstacles and understand the limits of access in our programs, in our services, in our activities. Okay. So why do we have to do this? What is the authority that requires the public agencies to make a transition plan? Well, the requirements come directly from the ADA, which we said 1990 was signed into law. And the entity that is over the American Disabilities Act is one that you don't want to really mess with. Drawing a blank. The Justice Department, thank you. The Department of Justice is the entity that oversees ADA. So if they come knocking on our doors and say, excuse me, Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, we're the Department of Justice, and you all are violating civil rights law, and you've not made things accessible, I guarantee you we're gonna do what they ask us to do. Now, even though the Justice Department is over it, at times they will ask other federal agencies to help them observe and help with accessibility. So if you're in the highway business like I am, most of the communication I've had about ADA is with the Federal Highway Administration. If you are in the prison industry with jails and that sort of thing, you will go to criminal justice. If you're with schools, you go to the Department of Education. So the Justice Department is still over all those and still collaborates and works with those, but it's so big that they'll use other federal entities to help govern. But anyway, the answer to the question is the ADA requires all, that's a big word, right? All public entities or agencies, no matter of size. Now you may be thinking, wait a minute, Jeff, I remember something that says 50 employees, a public entity of 50 employees. You are right. I want to read this one again. The requirements of the ADA apply to all public entities or agencies, no matter the size. So if you are a public entity that is less than 50, I'll get to the 50 on the next slide, but if you're less than 50, you're not excluded from making your facilities accessible. You are to make them accessible. That's the law. Where the 50 comes in is that the transition plan has formal procedures that's laid out, and those formal procedures are required by public entities with more than 50 people. So that's the 50 people. So essentially, a written transition plan is required for public entities more than 50 people. If you all are with me, can you give me a thumbs up? I should have given you, I should have asked you to give me a thumbs up right when I started so that you can find the thumbs up. Anybody find the thumbs up and give me a thumbs up if you're out there? All right, thank you, Sarah. I see if you're with me, give me a thumbs up, everybody. All right. Thank you, Randy. All right, we'll move on. Any questions to this point? Okay, there's some thumbs up. I know the thumbs up are kind of hard to find on iPads. If you're on a computer, they're a little bit easier, but hopefully you know where those are. Okay. Okay, we've got a question here. Question is from Tom Lovett. So everyone has to do it, but only agents with more than 50 employees have to document it. Tom, I agree with that statement. The have to document it. If you're representing an entity of less than 50, I would still recommend you document it. Like I said, I follow this stuff, but there's so much material on it. It's next to impossible unless it was my full-time job, which it's only a portion of my responsibility. Unless it was my full-time job, I wouldn't be able to follow everything that's going on around the nation. But what I have seen is when there has been lawsuits, the entities that win their lawsuit are ones that have a transition plan and are following it. So if I'm in your city or county, Tom, I'm sorry, I don't know where you work, but if I'm in your area and I have a disability and I come to you and say, I'm suing you, if you say, well, we have a transition plan, maybe you could get by with meeting minutes, or you could show things that you've done and that you're working towards accessible programs, including sidewalks. But I would recommend you document it. But what your statement is correct. Have to. Only agencies with 50 employees or more have to document it. So that's correct. Got a couple more message. Is there a boilerplate way to manufacture the transition plan? Blake, that's an excellent question. The NCHRP that I showed on a previous slide, and I actually have on one of the last slides of my my presentation today, it has best practices, and it goes, just really good job line by, or not line, section by section of what you need to do. And then there are others. I know, for example, Louisville Metro has a transition plan. The Kentucky Transportation Cabinet has a transition plan. There are others out there that you can look at. I don't know of any kind of form that says section 1 is this, section 2 is that, but the NCHRP comes the closest. Now, NCHRP is from a highway side. The NCHRP is a highway research group. And ADA is more than just roads. It is also your buildings, your parks, swimming pools, if you own them. I mean, any program, any physical building that you have, any physical infrastructure that you have has to be accessible. If it's not, then you are violating civil rights. Make sense? Good questions. Keep those going. I'll go a couple more slides and then I'll break again. You all give me a thumbs up, and then we'll do more questions, okay? So this is a good transition. It's almost like I asked Blake to ask his question. What should a transition plan include? And this is from the NCHRP. Okay, so the transition plan needs 4 tasks. First, identify physical obstacles. So that's probably a lot. Even for the smallest public entity, you're going to have a database of everything you own. And then you're going to have to assess the accessibility of all of that infrastructure. All right. And you're like, my goodness gracious. Yep. That's a big deal. Here's a couple of pictures. This is Louisville Metro's project. They hired a local engineering firm. I saw one of their engineers on the line here. Hello, Annette. And what that engineering firm did, they actually built this. They built it with parts off of out of stores or what they could buy, but essentially they've got a little cart. They've got a pad. This pole has a camera on top, and inside is a computer, and there's a laser level, and folks just walked along the sidewalks and collected data on width, cross slope, running slope, and then mapped it to GIS. So that's how Louisville did the first one, which was identify physical obstacles. They had to map out their sidewalks. I'm assuming that they did something similar for their buildings and other infrastructure, but again, I'm more highway side, so I'll stay involved in that. Okay, back to the 4 tasks. These are 4 different things that a transition plan should do. Once you know your deficiencies, then you need to come up with a way that you can make it accessible. And I don't want to get into a lot of this, although I'm happy to at the end if you all want to talk about this. This is more, I get into it in the class, but some of the ADA says to the maximum extent feasible, which is a big phrase they use over and over. Maximum extent feasible just simply translates, to a simple guy like me, it just means best we can. So there are some instances where you can't reach accessibility, but there's a documentation process in that, and you do it maximum extent feasible best you can. But back to the transition plan. As you identify needs, then you identify methods of solving it. Okay. Then the next thing is a schedule. How are you, the public entity, going to address these needs over the time? Of course, that translates to money a lot too. We'll get into money here in a little bit, but a transition plan is going to have a schedule and it's going to show when those upgrades are planned to happen. Okay. And then who's responsible? So the transition plan is going to say who the official is. This is the project manager or the program manager, probably more program manager, but the person who's responsible, the buck stops here type thing. And that person continues to monitor the work done, monitor the transition plan, making sure that public entity is moving towards a system that the goal is that everything you own be accessible. Put an asterisk beside that and read the asterisk unless it's technically infeasible to bring it up to accessibility. Okay. So that's the 4 things that need to be in a transition plan. Okay. So how does, now I'm showing my my bent here. I'm favoring the transportation side of things, the highway side of things. There's a whole different presentation if you want to get into buildings and other infrastructure. So how does a transition plan relate to the public agency's transportation planning process. Well, our federal friends, they want those to correlate. They want those to be complementary. A transition plan is intended to be a programming document, much like my friends at the Highway Department have a 6-year plan or enacted highway plan. That programming document talks about the projects that Kentucky intends to build. And then so the transition plan needs to align with that public agency's planning process. So the statewide transportation improvement program, the STIP or the TIP, ideally as a public entity figures out projects to go into the TIP, transportation improvement program, they will include projects that will affect accessibility, that will bring up accessibility. So it's really supposed to interact. And those improvements need to, those accessibility improvements need to be a part of the transportation program, especially the sidewalks, obviously the crosswalks and those types of things. So you may wonder, well, how do you incorporate those improvements? Glad you asked. So any new construction project, and this is really not just streets and roads, but buildings and any kind of infrastructure. But anything new, it must be accessible. If it's not, there are a few ways that it may be technically infeasible, especially sidewalks on steep topography or that sort of thing. But if you can make it accessible, you should. I said that incorrectly. If you can make it accessible, you shall. It's not a should, you shall make it accessible. So new construction, that's kind of the easier way of building in accessibility into our infrastructure. We also need to be incorporating improvements if there are accessible needs out there and there's not a project that's coming or may not come in a long time. The public entity can consider standalone accessibility projects. I know one of the states that I work with, the gentleman who is the ADA coordinator for his state. He actually does. He actually has a certain amount of money. He's from Iowa. The Iowa DOT sets aside a certain amount of money every year for standalone accessibility projects. So he has actually prioritized those. That's a part of his transition plan. He prioritized those based on population, which makes sense. He did spread it out a little bit so that it wasn't all just focused on some of the bigger cities and things like that, but he's working through, he's got standalone accessibility projects every year. He works for the Highway Department and does a lot of sidewalks and crosswalk projects. So the third thing, how to incorporate accessibility improvements is with scheduled maintenance activities. Now, these maintenance activities more than just cleaning the streets or picking up tree limbs after storms or that sort of thing. This is maintenance activities to your infrastructure, whether that be it's mainly paving, right? If it's a highway project, if you're doing overlay or if you're doing milling and filling, you should incorporate accessibility needs of your crosswalks and your corners. So the pedestrian curb ramps are brought into the resurfacing. It's a long story that I can tell later if we have time. I want to be respectful of your time, but the feds have decided that if you are doing resurfacing and that resurfacing touches a corner where there is no pedestrian curb ramps, but there is a pedestrian facility, that you must bring in pedestrian curb ramps to that corner as a part of the resurfacing. When that happened at the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, that really, quite honest, just frustrated us, because we didn't have enough money to do all the resurfacing that we wanted to do anyway, but it is a mandate. And so now for several years, there has been a tie between accessibility and the resurfacing program. Now we've made great strides in that, and we're continuing. Well, I say we, I'm with UK now, but I meant to, when the Transportation Cabinet has made great strides in improving accessibility and removing barriers. So when and how should the transition plan be updated? Well, the guidance says periodically. And I would say to all of you and my friends, don't ask any more questions. If they say periodically, then we get to decide what that means. I would recommend, and this comes from guidance too, it's not just my opinion, but it's things that I've read and agree with. I think it's really good to tie your transition planning, your accessibility planning to your planning process. So in other words, the cabinet has every 2 years releases a new enacted highway plan. So if there are new construction projects and they have pedestrian facilities in them, they are going to be accessible, because that's a shall. The resurfacing is going to help with accessibility. And then if there are any standalone accessibility projects that the highway department is going to do, and they map that to their transition plan, they actually have a little bit of programmatic money for ADA. It's called Z various. If you ever worked in the highway department, they have a Z various pot of money for ADA standalone projects. But they're working that 2 years, assessing what has been done, hopefully staying on schedule, sometimes not, with COVID and what we've experienced in the last couple of years, some of that's behind. But I would recommend you update your transition plan as you update your STIP and TIP. And you may even want to, in your transition plan, point to the STIP and TIP and say, our projects are going to be monitored by the STIP and TIP, if that makes any sense, instead of having a list of projects in the transition plan. Okay. Now, where can you go to learn more? I've called out this NCHRP a couple of times. It's titled ADA Transition Plans, a Guide to the Best Management Practices. If I needed to write a transition plan, I would look at this. I've said this probably now 4 times, it'll be 5th now. I'm obviously pointing more towards the highway side. A transition plan needs to occur for all of your infrastructure. There are guides out there to do that as well. It's just not in my competency, so I can talk about it, but I'm not as comfortable talking about the vertical world, buildings and that sort of thing as I am streets and sidewalks and things. I'm happy to help you if you need me. There's my email and my phone number. But that ADA or that NCHRP there is really, really good, especially from the highway side of things. Now, I built this to be about 30 minutes, which it's gone about half an hour. I don't want to be accused of punishing you all sitting around talking for a full hour on ADA transition plans, but I think all the key elements of what I've presented are here. Everybody should have that PDF that I sent in the chat. If you had problems with that, let me know, and maybe we can email it to you. But I am now open. We can talk for the rest of our time, or we can talk for 1 or 2 minutes, but I am now open to have dialogue and conversation with you all about ADA transition plans, or any other questions that you may have about ADA.
Could you send that PDF again? I don't know if you sent it at the very beginning.
I did.
I was about a minute late getting on, so I don't know if other people may have missed it as well.
Okay, I just dropped it. Lyles, you got it? You see it?
I got it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking that. I probably should have done that anyway, but appreciate it.
Jeff, I apologize if it is a repeat. I had to focus on something there for a second, but you had a question that popped up asking about a boilerplate way to manufacture transition plans. Did you guys cover that?
We did. But thank you, Megan, for helping me. I need all the help I can get. You know that.
Now I kind of working on something there for a second and I was like, oh, I missed that. So guys, like Jeff said, we are going to get out a little bit early today, but before we release you or I go into my big spiel, if you have any questions for Jeff or something that you'd like to follow up on, feel free to put those in the chat or take yourself off mute.